Welcome to a brand new season of Knitting Daily. I'm your co-host Eunny Jang, and our theme today is cables. One of the most traditional knitting techniques, cables can be classic textured ropes, twists, or braids. We're also introducing a new feature on our program. Each week we'll start out with the basics. Many of you have emailed us asking for some beginner tips or a brush up on your basic skills, so today I'll be showing you how to knit a basic rope cable. Then our first guest is Kathy Zimmerman, who's the queen of cables. Kathy demonstrates combining lace and cable designs in her colorful Katharine Hepburn cardigan. Next, Shay will join me with a reversible cable scarf perfect for all seasons, knitted in both cotton and wool yarns. And last, Adina Klein will join Liz to offer her pearls of wisdom about cables and other traditional knitting techniques. So let's get started. You may have seen lots of really beautiful cabled sweaters out and about or in knitting patterns. Cables obviously can be incredibly complex with full of crossings and lots of different movements in the cables. But really, it just boils down to a couple simple things, just knitting stitches out of sequence. So really, even in a sweater like this, where you've got this beautiful lattice work and all these complicated crossings, all of this really is just an extrapolation of the simple techniques that you see in this basic rope cable here. And this rope cable is echoed in this garment as well. It's just one of the most fundamental and basic things about cables. And if you know how to do this, really, you can do almost any cable. So I'm just going to show you how to go ahead and do that. When you work with cables, typically you want to use a yarn with a really round cross section. So that can mean either a singles yarn that's just a single ply, or a yarn with a lot of plies in it that's really firm. And the reason for that is it's all about stitch definition. It's all about really making that cable pop and kind of get a high relief sort of effect. So here I'm just using a really nice smooth merino so you can really see everything that's going on. And I'm going to just compare for a second with the chart here. You can see that I've got two different charts for my two different cable swatches. Cables can either always cross to the left or to the right. And on this chart, all my cables are crossing to the left. And you can see in the chart up here that these symbols all stand for cable crossings. And there are all different kinds of cable notations and cable different ways of charting out a cable, but almost all of them will have some sort of visual representation of showing you in which direction the cable is moving and how often. And really, you can see that we've got 1, 2, 3 cable crossings here, and they translate just as simply as 1, 2, and then there will be a third one right up here. So how do you knit a cable? I've got 3 different cables here that are all of different widths, and as you can see, it's just a matter of taking, if you've got 8 stitches, as in this cable, it's just a matter of taking these 4 stitches, the first half of the cable, and just crossing them over these 4 stitches, the second half of the cable. So just knitting them out of sequence, crossing them over each other and then going on and knitting. If you have a 6-stitch cable, you'd do 3 over 3. If you have a 4-stitch cable, you'd do 2 over 2, and so on. And you can really have a cable almost as wide as you can imagine. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this here. I'm going to get my yarn ready, and then usually you'll use a tool called a cable needle. There are techniques for cabling without a cable needle, but those are, you probably want to start out with just trying using a cable needle in the first place. It's just a little bit simpler to see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and knit up to my first 4-stitch cable here. This is the garter border, so I'm just knitting. I'm going to purl this stitch, and cables almost always, if a cable is in stockinette stitch, as these are, cables will almost always have a purl channel on either side of them, and that just makes the stockinette portion, the cable itself, just pop out. I'm using sort of just a medium gauge cable needle here because it most closely matches the gauge of my regular knitting needle. You never want to use anything much bigger, or bigger at all really, than your regular knitting needle, since it'll pull the stitches out of shape. So this is a cable crossing left, or sometimes you'll see it called a cable crossing forwards. I've come to the cable. I'm going to take that first half of the cable, those first 2 stitches, and I'm just going to slip them to my cable needle purlwise. So insert the cable needle as if to purl, and just slip it off without knitting it. And since this is a cable crossing forward, or a cable crossing left, I'm going to hold these stitches to the front of the work. I'm going to go ahead and knit the rest of the cable stitches, 1 and 2. So I've knitted those. And now I'm going to take the stitches on my cable needle and knit those. I'm just going to maneuver it to the back here to make it a little bit easier to work. And go ahead and knit those. And you can see that the cable stitches have been, the cable has been crossed. And you would do the same for the two wider cables as well. Now I'm going to show you a cable crossing to the right, and it's almost exactly the same thing, except it's just a little bit backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and work my edging, my garter stitch edging, work that purl channel, and this is the wider cable, so it's going to be 4 stitches crossing over 4. So I'm going to slip and slip as if to purl, 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. And this is a cable crossing to the right, so I'm going to hold the stitches to the back of the work this time. So I'm going to move the entire thing to the back. All my yarn is in front, and my needles are ready in front of the cable needle. Now I'm going to go ahead and just knit the second half of that cable, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then go ahead and reposition and work those stitches off the cable needle here. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see that the cable has been crossed. And you're going to want to cross your cables more or less frequently depending on the width of the cable and the look that you'd like. You can do it evenly or unevenly. There are so many different things that you can do with this technique, and we'll show you a bunch of those coming up when we come right back.
Knitting Daily. Make time for yarn every day. Visit our website for free access to all the patterns, project ideas, tips, and techniques from this season of Knitting Daily. Log on and get printer-friendly patterns and more at knittingdailytv.com. This is show 301. Take your knitting to the next level. Visit knittingdailytv.com for your free e-booklet of 13 tips, hints, and secrets to improve your knitting skills from the designers featured on Knitting Daily TV. Knitting Daily has been sponsored in part by Interweave magazines and books, inspiring, encouraging, and supporting creative self-expression through art and craft media. Interweavestore.com. Webs, America's Yarn Store, a source for knitting and crocheting yarns and supplies. Yarn.com. Taki Stacy Charles, feel the desire, knit your passion. TakiStacyCharles.com. TNNA, the National Needle Arts Association, the organization for independent needle arts retailers, TNNA.org.